listening to the Bulldog Hour, getting you inside the Wilson football program with weekly game previews, recaps, highlights, and interviews. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and Justin Raffoff.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 5th episode of the Bulldog Hour's 3rd season. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mays, and sitting next to me, my co-host, Justin Raffoff.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Hard to believe this is our 5th episode of this season already. It goes really fast. And thinking back to like the previous seasons where, when we first started this, we just had a couple episodes throughout the whole year.
We had 4 in season 1.
Right, now we're up to 5 already in this season. So it's a lot of fun. It's kind of changed form a little bit, but it's exciting and glad to be back.
Much like season 1, we've made the unfortunate decisions to schedule shows after losses, which isn't ideal, but, we'll deal with it. And hopefully you'll put up with us as we talk about the most recent Wilson game, as well as the game from 2 weeks ago. And we'll preview weeks 4 and 5 as the Bulldogs will kick off the Lancaster-Lebanon League Section 1 portion of their schedule, 7 in a row with LL1 teams. And Wilson is searching for their 10th consecutive league title, and they look to improve upon their amazing and legendary streak of LL Section 1 victories, which I believe stands right now at 64.
Yeah, those are some ridiculous numbers you were throwing out there, like 10th straight title and, number of league victories in the 60s. Just kind of amazing, and we're through that non-league schedule, which we will kind of summarize in just a few minutes. And then it's onto the league schedule, so it's kind of like, you have those 3 games at the beginning, and then, it's on to the next 7. It's kind of like different subsets within the season. Kind of one part is behind them and a big part is still ahead. So we'll look back a little bit and we'll also preview what's to come.
Looking, back at stats like that, we mentioned that searching for a 10th straight league title. Their next victory in the LL League will be their 65th straight if it should come this Friday night against Warwick. Those numbers are impressive. And looking over Coach Dom's tenure as head coach, started in 2006. Only one season has he lost more than 2 games. Now the Bulldogs have lost 2 games already in 2017. And unless they would run the entire table, winning a state title, they're guaranteed to be just the second team in his tenure to lose at least 3 games. But that 2007 squad is an interesting comparison just because, they finished the regular season at 7-3. Now, I know back then more teams made the playoffs. I believe that year it was 16. I don't think it was 8 like we're at now. So a 7-3 got them in the playoffs, and they actually pulled a few upsets.
Yeah.
And they honestly probably should have been 10-3 playing for a district championship. If you're familiar with the 2007 team, that squad lost in overtime to Harrisburg, and very controversial ending to that game. I think it was the Harrisburg player was whistled down when he had fumbled and Wilson recovered. Now, obviously, there's no guarantee that Wilson would have ended up winning, scoring a touchdown, kicking the field goal, whatever, but Harrisburg, I believe, continued that drive and kicked the game-winning field goal. A drive they shouldn't have even had the opportunity to do. Wilson should have had the ball and the opportunity to win it. But then we know that squad had a lot of young players to come back in 2008 and get so close to making it to the state title game in another controversial ending, one that I believe you were at.
Yeah, that is a game. Well, that is a team and a season that'll stick with me for a long time. But that specific game, yeah, I will vividly have
Nightmares?
Pictures of that for a long time. Yeah, and I was just sitting in the stands, watching, thinking to myself, don't say things inappropriate. Don't say things inappropriate.
Don't yell at the refs.
This is a high school football game. And I did. I kept my cool, but I kept my cool outwardly. Inwardly, I was
screaming,
stunned that what I had just seen. But
I vividly remember where I was and what was happening. you were updating me, and I believe you actually called me when the game was over. I was actually driving back from Columbus, Ohio, not here, to West Lafayette, Indiana, in a whole spiel about exchanging cars and having extra cars where we lived at the time. But I was driving by myself, sick, waiting for updates from you, because obviously I couldn't get a Pennsylvania high school radio broadcast in, Western Ohio at this point. And I just remember you calling and just being furious and depressed all at the same time.
Yeah, it was awful.
Yeah, good times, good times.
Still, and I know, we put an asterisk near this because, it's a little different for me, having not lived here my whole life, and due to age and things. That 2008 team is the best Wilson team I personally ever saw. I'm not saying they're the greatest, but they were the best that I ever saw, in my opinion. I know their record was matched just a few years ago, and maybe it was some of the newness to me in 2008. That's when I started teaching, so I was around some of those kids, but there was that whole idea was still new to me, so maybe that's some of it. 2014 team was obviously incredible as well. That 2008 team was just unbelievable.
I wish I would have had the opportunity to see them more than the one game I did. I was there in Hershey for the demolition of Cumberland Valley, where they went up, I think, 28 or 35-0, and Cumberland Valley had 8 turnovers.
Yeah.
It was a spectacular performance. I wish I would have been able to see more from that 2008 squad. But your praise is backed up by the coaches. If you remember 2 years ago when we interviewed the coaches prior to the 2015 season, we asked the question of Coach Walber, what's one of the best defensive squads or teams that he's coached. He mentioned, obviously, some of the teams growing up in the 70s and 80s, and actually teams he was a part of. But the 2008 team is the most recent team that he mentioned just because of how smart and disciplined they were.
Right.
He said they could go over a scheme from 5-6 weeks prior, having not run it in a month and a half, and they would know exactly how to do it.
Yeah, and the talk about how they used to they were coming up with stuff to put in, schemes to put in, just to keep them on their toes. Only because they had done everything that they could work on with some of the things, with the schemes. So they were coming up with stuff to put in that they knew we're probably never going to run this, but we need to put something in to kind of keep these guys, on the edge, keep them, engaged here. That's a crazy scenario when you think that doesn't happen in high school sports. That doesn't happen in college sports. That doesn't happen in places where you're coming up with stuff. So just kind of speaks to how special that team was. Again, not neglecting any other teams, especially for me because it was a more narrow time frame than for some others. But that 2008 team was pretty special. But kind of looking at some of those teams. And some of the teams that have built some of these things that have gone on, these numbers, we find ourselves well into it, and now you have these teams that are trying to just build and expand.
We're going to continue our look back only because a question that was posed to me early and often after the end of the game Friday night was, when was the last time Wilson was 1-2 after 3 games? So I immediately started to research via Max Preps and attempted through the Wilson Football Tradition Club stats book, which is excellent. And if you're a member of the Tradition Club, make sure you stop by the stand during home games and pick up your free copy of that book. And if you're not a member of the club, I believe you can purchase them for $5. Definite must-have for Wilson football fans. But it didn't get me where I wanted to be. So I consulted the Red and Eagle archives to figure out when was the last time Wilson started 1-2, and I think I nailed it down. I hope I'm right. I hope I'm not wrong on this. But the last time it happened was way back in 1993. So it's been 24 years since the Bulldogs were under 500 after their 3rd game. And we just pulled up a few stats to give you an idea of what was happening the last time that this occurred. And sports-wise, something interesting, growing up, Justin, I know, is well aware of this. The Phillies in 1993 doing something special on their way to an NL pennant. I remember being a kid being super excited about that. Also, both of us being Penn State fans. The fall of 1993, or back in September of 93, Penn State joined the Big Ten.
Yeah.
So it was a big milestone as well. And
looking at the at the pin there, Mellon Bank also existed.
Yeah, there you go. Right. So the first game in the Big Ten for Penn State was September 4th, 1993. A stamp cost just 29 cents. Bill Clinton hadn't even been in office for a full year yet. And various other prices that people like to mention when you're looking back on past decades.
Yeah, to be honest, the price stuff just kind of is depressing. So.
Well, the stamp for sure, because isn't it like double that now?
I think it's about to be triple that, I think. Yeah.
You know, gas at $1.11.
Boy,
those are the days.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's been a while since Wilson was 1-2, September 1993. And I actually have the Red and Eagle stories from those first 3 games of the 93 squad. They actually opened the season at home back-to-back with back-to-back losses. They were 0-2, losing to Pottsville in a shutout, which the Bulldogs hadn't been shut out in, I think, close to 30 years at that point. Then they lost to O&J Roberts before bouncing back with a win on the road at Boyertown, and there's your 1-2 start. The Pottsville game, the first game of the season, was actually pushed back due to a crazy thunderstorm that rolled through, and a lot of Berks County football games were postponed to Saturday. And coincidentally, that Saturday, September 4th, was the first game that Penn State played in the Big Ten. So there's your connection for you. So yeah, 24 years since the Bulldogs started 1-2. I know a lot of people ask that question. There you have it. Hopefully I'm right. I think I'm right. And if I'm wrong, please let me know, and I will correct that. But hey, you know, these things happen. But the silver lining in this story, the most important part, and why I even bring it up, is because what the 1993 team was able to do. Because if you go to my Wilson Bulldogs blog at wilsonbulldogs.blogspot.com, I kind of keep a lot of stats up there. You look at the past seasons, you'll notice the 1993 team starting 1-2 and actually were 2-3 after 5 games. Well, they just went on to tie for the league championship. So one of Wilson's 30 league titles happened when they started 1-2 and 2-3.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point that we don't want to skip over or take too lightly. Because we had tossed it around a little bit. What do we do with that question that we got from a number of people early on? We don't want to ignore it. At the same time, we don't want to harp too much on it because it seems like we're trying to drag it down. Because no, if anything else, we want to be like, look, that's part of the story here about the Wilson tradition is that even when they have things not go their way early on, they kind of stick with it and they get the job done as they move on.
Right.
And there's no reason to think that that's not going to be the case this time. We've seen it how many times. Obviously, we're hopeful that that's the case, but that's kind of what we need to happen here. And we have. I know that it's unrelated. Like these kids weren't even born then. A lot of for a while now, those kids haven't been born that were on the team the last time that happened, but we talk about how many of those things come through and we see pop up in the program over and over and over again. And why can't this be one of those things too, where the adversity early on, they overcome it, and they, next thing they're not marching through, but they hit their stride, I should say, and and are competing and having some more positive outcomes. And there's no reason in my mind to think that can't happen this time as well.
And the crazy thing is the 93 team, their 3 losses in their first 5 games weren't even close.
No.
They got housed by Pottsville 27-0 at home, then lost again at Gursky. I guess it wasn't even Gursky yet.
Yeah, now you're getting... I don't think it was.
I don't think it was in 93. So they lost at home 32-6.
Right.
Now, they beat Boyertown at 28-14 on the road. Then they beat Penn Manor in the Ella opener, but it was close. I think it was 13-6 or 13-7. So 2 relatively close wins, 2 blowout losses, and then they got crushed by Hempfield to drop to 2-3. They lost 33-8. And then what did they do? They got it together. They won 6 straight. They finished 8-3. Yes, they played 11 regular season games. And the finale of the season, because unfortunately with the only 4 teams making the playoffs, the 93 squad didn't get a chance to play in the second season. Hempfield, despite sharing the title with Wilson, ended up getting one of those spots. But the Bulldogs finished with a 60-14 blowout of Mifflin to end the season as a co-champion of the LL League Section 1.
Right. So, like we said, we don't want to really harp on the negatives of that. We want to kind of point out the positives. Like they were able to regroup, continue to get better as the season went on, and although the season as a whole may not have gone the way they exactly thought from the beginning or would have liked from the beginning, they were able to get it through. And I am sure that what did you say, 60-14? 60-14 sticks with a lot of those guys.
That's
as they
etched on
finished
the
out.
Gursky Lynn Trophy.
Yeah, so this team still has this year, the 2017 team, while maybe hasn't gotten off to the start that they would like, still has plenty of opportunity. And like you were talking about, we've seen many more positive signs than they did the last time.
Right, the losses were close.
They could turn it around. Right.
The team didn't give up. That's the biggest thing
right.
so
and
far.
We talked about that last show.
Right, exactly, because we were talking after the Mifflin loss that they could have just stopped. They could have seen that they were beaten, they couldn't hang, it was over. But they fought back, and they came very close to tying the game in the fourth quarter.
They could be 3-0.
Right, and some people would say they could be 0-3.
Right.
And there's a close victory versus Springfield.
But you know what? They're sitting at 1-2, so it's time to. Those are in the past. We talk about this a number of times. It's Sunday night. They're moving on, like right now earlier today. Like they've moved on, and so
recap Central Dauphin. Get ready for Warwick.
Right. So
as of tomorrow, it's all Warwick.
Right.
Central Dauphin's done,
and that's basically what we're going to do.
Exactly. So before we do get into recapping the victory versus Springford and the loss versus Central Dauphin, let's go through our business portion of the show and just let you know how you can get more of us. Remember to follow and interact with us on Facebook.com/Bulldog Hour. The main page where we do live game coverage is Facebook.com/Wilson Bulldogs Football. On Twitter, 4 of them there, at Bulldog Hour, at Wilson Bulldogs, at Coach Joe Mays, and at Mr_Raffoff. On Instagram, get pictures from the games Friday night, at Bulldog Hour or at Wilson Bulldogs Football. And finally, you can get an archive of the show at youtube.com/user/Joe Mays and J-Raff Show, which is Justin and my pro sports show, and that's just kind of where we upload all of our video. And if those social sites aren't the thing for you, you can go the old-fashioned way. Send us an email, show@bulldoghour.com or joe@bulldoghour.com, or go to just bulldoghour.com, click on contact, and fill out the form right there. We do want to thank our sponsors, May's Sandwich Shop, as well as our anonymous donor. And there's been people that have reached out to us and have said that they're going to support or have supported in the past, and we appreciate them thinking of us. And there's obviously a bunch of ways that you can support us. Monetarily is one of them, but that's not the only way, and we talk about it all the time.
Yeah, like and share.
Like and share. Get the word out there, Facebook, Twitter. Just let people know that you enjoy the coverage and that you want more, and we'll give you as much as we can spare time-wise. Our next live show will be 2 weeks from tonight after Week 5 game at McCaskey. That will be Sunday, October 1st, right here on Facebook Live at 8:30 p.m. I already mentioned about supporting the show. There are sponsorship and advertising opportunities, so if that's something you're interested in, visit the contact section at bulldoghour.com. The last thing we want to do before we dive in to the game recaps is we want to start putting out an interview with someone for each show. We want to talk to past players, past coaches, and media members that cover Wilson, Berks football, District 3, LL, things like that. So first up, we got to talk with Bruce Badgley from EasternPAFootball.com. We just did this Friday night prior to the game against Central Dauphin, and we're going to play that for you right now. Oh, you already started?
Just started.
Okay. All right. Well, we're joined right now by Bruce Badgley from EasternPAFootball.com. Bruce, thanks for joining us.
Hey, always a pleasure, Joe.
Bulldog Hour.
Always a pleasure.
So, Bruce, how long have you been covering high school football?
Oh, gosh. I'm going on my 6th year with Eastern PA Football. Started exclusively with Mifflin, but have branched out to, all of District 3 over the last probably 4 years now. So really love it. Love seeing all the teams. Last year I got to do 3 state championship games,
Wow.
which is probably the highlight. All the District 3 title games. So it's an enormous amount of fun, and seeing all the teams, all the people, all the coaches, all the fans, always good stuff.
Do you cover any other high school sports?
I'm going to start basketball this year
right.
with Lancaster LL Hoops with Andy Herr, my buddy, on the fresh set of downs that we do Thursday night on Eastern PA Football Twitter page.
Check that out on Periscope, I believe, is the platform throughout Twitter. I was a guest 2 weeks ago prior to the Mifflin game. So how did you end up getting hooked up with Eastern PA Football? Did you contact them?
I just answered an ad. They were looking for reporters. I had my daughters were all cheerleaders for Governor Mifflin, so I didn't miss a home or away football game for 11 years. That's really how I got to know District 3 football, Berks football, playoff games, district championship games, and just answered an ad, got started with them. I had some journalism when I was in high school, editor of my high school newspaper, worked on the yearbook staff, got back into it again, and I really love it. Really love the aspect of actually helping fans out. What we're doing this year that's new is we're providing instant replay to fans via an app directly on their phone. So not only are we giving fans that are interested in the game highlights via Twitter, but the fans at the game, we're enhancing their experience by giving them instant replay, which until this year really didn't exist for any high school football that I know of.
Now, you mentioned starting with Mifflin games, and you got a family connection through Mifflin. But when you were younger, were you a local to this area, or did you grow up outside of Pennsylvania?
I'm originally from Indiana. I was a basketball guy. I mean, it was basketball. I did play, 3 years varsity high school football with some pretty good competition. Some guys that I played against made the pros. Mark Herman would be one that probably everybody might be familiar with, kind of aging myself there. But did play against some of those guys. Went to a lot of Notre Dame games and that. So was really started to get into, football, in my youth, but now even more so.
What's your favorite part of covering high school football?
Passion that everybody has for this game in the state. And we had Rick Perez on last night on Fresh Set of Downs, and we were talking about why I got away from basketball and into football. And that's because in Pennsylvania, football is where the fans' passion is for high school sports. In Indiana, it was basketball. So that's why I was passionate about that. Fans are passionate about football in PA. That's what I gravitated to.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think there's a common misconception about Scholastic media members that you'd like to correct? Anything out there that people think, well, that's not what we do?
It's hard work. Respect everybody who covers these games, from radio, newspaper, guys like us that really, for nothing more than it, are doing it for the love of the game. It is hard work, but the passion that we have for this, have enormous respect for everybody that I deal with. Everybody always treats me with respect. Not only the media members, but the administrators. We're kind of like a little traveling army. It's a reunion every time we do a team's game because you run into the media guys from that team, and that's an enormous amount of fun for me.
So you've been covering high school football in Pennsylvania for about 6 years now, or this is your 6th or 7th year doing it. You've probably seen a lot of games, but which one stands out? Which is your most memorable so far?
Oh, actually, the 4A championship game last year when Cathedral Prep came back in the fourth quarter against Imhotep was a really thrilling game. And the fact, too, that, that I got all the shots on video there, too. I had the one thing that you kind of fear when you get into a big game like that is that you might miss the big play. You want to share that with everybody else. And for me, being able to get that touchdown shot, the winning long touchdown pass right into the guy's hands, and thankfully he caught the pass and ran right toward me. So I had a beautiful shot of that, and for me, that was the best experience I've had.
Who's the most dominant player you've covered so far?
It's a guy that's playing right now. I mean, Micah Parsons, clearly. I haven't seen anybody in covering it and even watching District 3 football, for 11 years, that is more dominant, that's more transcendent, that brings more energy to a football game than Micah Parsons, clearly.
What's your favorite venue to cover a game?
This one here, and because it's so friendly. Best press box, I think, is Reading High.
Okay.
Clearly.
Yeah, Shirt.
Shirt Stadium. It's
Cool place
for
to
us.
play.
Well, for us, the little things like having a bathroom in the press box.
Little perks, right?
But also Hershey's great because we get food. There's a lot of good ones. But for nostalgia, there isn't any better place than Pottsville.
Okay.
It feels like you're walking back in time when you walk into that stadium. And I'd say overall, that's probably my favorite one.
Cool. If there's a game you could witness that, maybe it's a dream matchup, maybe it's at a dream place, what's something that you could create out of your head and say, I would love to cover this?
Any state championship game regarding a Berks County team, Wilson or whatever like that, would be really awesome. That would be just such an emotional experience I couldn't even imagine.
All right, last three we'll get a little bit more local here and go with Wilson stuff.
Sure.
Kind of reminiscent of the questions I just asked you, but what's the most entertaining Wilson game you've covered in the last 7 years?
Well, the most I guess for fan value, it was probably when Wilson came back to beat the Jan Johnson Mifflin team here.
Yep.
Yeah, in overtime. I think it was 35-34 and on the missed extra point.
Yep.
That was probably, in the games that I've been covering, probably the most memorable because, really Mifflin had it wrapped up, and somehow that Wilson magic, that pixie dust got spread out on that field, and they won that game.
What's the most exciting Bulldog player you've seen so far?
Yeah, this year or overall?
Overall.
It's tough. Iggy's been, pretty exciting. I think, Sean Hour, the linebacker from a couple years ago, in transferring, through even to the Big 33 game, always seemed like he was the best player, on the field, in my book. Really talented guy. I don't go as far back as, Chad Henne and those guys, so I can only talk about recent memories.
Sure. All right, last thing, what are your thoughts on the Wilson program that you've known it over the last 11 years? You said being Mifflin with your daughters, now covering for the last 6 years. When someone mentions Wilson football, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Class. Class program, one that takes winning seriously. It's not only just a program, but it's a community, and that's really what high school football is in Pennsylvania, is community. It's not just a coach, it's not just the players. There has to be such support by the community to make it work, from the people that provide the food and the fundraising and everything else. Get these guys to camp. Everybody's setting up before the game. Really class in that regard.
All right, Bruce, well, that's all we got for you. I thank you for joining us here before the game against Central Dauphin, and hopefully we have to catch up with you again soon. Make sure you follow Bruce and all the great coverage at Eastern PA Football does, as well as Replay Locker. That's Bruce's baby, and he's been doing a great job with it, and it's only going to get better from here on out.
Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks. All right, so that was Bruce Badgley from EasternPAFootball.com. Gracious enough to give us an interview, and we thank him for that. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. He covers a bunch of Berks teams, gets to Mifflin and Wilson often, but I know he's seen plenty of the others as well, and he does that great Replay Locker feature where if you're at the game, he can give you a sheet and you can watch the replays of the games from the stands, and he tweets them out as well, so if you're not at the game, you want to see the key plays, he's got them for you.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think we've seen him at the Mifflin game and the CD game.
Yep.
I don't believe he was at the Springford game. That's kind of he probably did more of a.
I think he did a Weiser game.
Okay.
I want to say
Weiser played Berks Catholic, so he probably did.
Okay, yeah, I think that's the one that he was at then. So we thank Bruce for that interview opportunity, and hopefully we'll have more where that comes from in the following weeks. I know we've reached out to a couple people to interview for future shows. All right, so a quick look at the schedule just to give everyone an idea of where we're at. Again, the entire left side is done already.
Yeah.
We're gone. Now, 2 of them were scrimmages, but the first 3 games over. So now we're in the middle. We're in the meat of the schedule there. We got Warwick coming up this week and McCaskey the following. We'll get to both of those games. Before we do so, we got to talk about week 2, which was down in Royersford to take on the Springford Rams. Now, everyone remembers the game from last year, right, Justin? That double overtime thriller that Wilson came out on top, 41-40. So you know that the Rams, led by former Wilson assistant Chad Brubaker, were ready to go for this one. We mentioned in the preview on episode 3-4 that the Rams graduated a lot. They didn't have a lot of guys back, and it showed at times this year with a loss in the opener, and they weren't the same team we saw a year ago. But they had a skill guy back and the quarterback back, and I always pronounce his name wrong, so I don't know if you want to give that one a shot.
No, we'll just call him Springford
TJ,
quarterback.
His
Yeah,
TJ.
yeah.
Springford
TJ,
quarterback
and
TJ.
TJ did a great job.
And he did an amazing job. He was one of the best players on the field all night long. Thankfully for us, but unfortunately for him, Wilson did come out on top. The Bulldogs beat the Rams 28-21, but it wasn't without drama. They had to come back from this one. They were losing, in at least one instance. They were losing at halftime. A blocked extra point or a missed extra point. As a result, they had to go for 2, and obviously they ended up getting that. They got 4 touchdowns on the board, all of them scored by the same player.
Yeah.
Mr. Iggy Reynoso had himself a night, both on the ground and through the air. And let's take a look at some of those statistics for you from the Week 2 game down at Springford. Bulldogs, Rams, first downs. Wilson ended up with 13. Springford had 17. Rushing yards, neither team could get much going, both under 100. Wilson at 85, Springford at 65. The passing game was on fire, especially for Springford. We mentioned the Rams quarterback TJP, we'll call him. 277 yards through the air. Now, Jurg had nearly 200 as well, 193. Total yards, Wilson 278, Springford 342. The Rams kept the ball a little bit longer than Wilson did, 25-32 to Wilson's 22-28. Third downs, not too kind for either team. Wilson 4 of 11, Springford 5 of 12. Fourth downs, neither team spectacular there. Wilson 1 of 2, but Springford was 0 of 3. But both teams were perfect in the red zone at 2 of 2. And, if you get the third downs up there a little bit, those key stats, sometimes that are overlooked, would come out pretty good. If you're perfect in the red zone, that's always a good sign.
Yeah, so, looking at those statistics, Wilson kind of got outmatched a little bit in many of the statistical categories. However, we joke about this sometimes. Not the one that counts the most, right? So they were able to find a way. Sometimes like yardage can be deceiving, depending on where your starting position is, and things like that. So, I know you mentioned a couple times, and we may see some of that in just a bit, but, Iggy had some that weren't necessarily the longest yardage-wise, but he ran a long way because,
changed direction,
right,
left
and
right.
completely surrounded and makes his way from one side of the field to the other, and runs further side to side. They did, to the end zone, but had some amazing plays there. So they got it done when it counted. I thought, they played well at times in the first half, and in the second half, I felt like they played a little bit more consistent, even though
a little bit better.
Right, there was you could look at it as they lost the first half per se. They were down 14-13.
True.
Even though it seemed like they were in control for like a decent amount, and then next thing you know, they're down 14-13 and a half.
Big plays. That's been their
exactly.
Achilles heel so far this year. We've seen it in every game. Big plays, and unfortunately has been coming through the air. More often than not, it's been a big pass play, and that just takes the momentum out of the team, and it's tough to get back. Now, thankfully, they were able to do that in week 2. Weren't able to overcome it in week 1 or week 3. So before we talk about individual players, let's take a look at the highlights from the game, the key plays for the Bulldogs, and all the scoring plays that happened down in Royersford a little over a week ago in week 2 of the Wilson football season. All right, so Bulldogs at Rams, September 8th, 2017. Wilson started off with the ball. We got to see some big things from Andrew Weller on the drive. And then we get our first touchdown here, and you get to see what Justin talked about. Iggy ran a lot on this play, but he only actually needed, I think, 7 or 8 yards total.
Right.
He ended up getting them, and I got a nice little shot of that diving touchdown.
But he probably ran close to like 40 yards for, a 7-yard
right.
a 7-yard run. Yeah.
Now we're going to see one of Springford quarterback TJ's attempts here that is actually picked off by Sean McAndrew, who has been one of the brighter spots in the Wilson secondary. He's played rather well for the Bulldogs with a couple picks here in the early season. However, on this play, you see a bobbled snap by Springford, and he just picks it up and waltzes right in. A broken play for a touchdown. That kind of can define the early season for the Wilson.
Yes.
Bounces not going their way, and that was one key point right there. And here, once again, we get to see Iggy make a bunch of people miss on a short pass from Uhrig, and he does the rest with some nice blocking downfield. He will get in for the score to put Wilson back up on top. But again, I mentioned, missed extra point, wide left. So Wilson leads 13-7. The Rams would answer, as you heard Justin and I mentioned, they were down. The Bulldogs were down at half. So another... looks like a little bit of blown coverage in the Wilson secondary, and Springford's quarterback finds the guy, gets the score, kick is good, and at halftime, Wilson is losing 14-13. Now we're in the second half, and Wilson gets a key play from the defense. They had pinned Springford deep, forced a fumble, and a few plays later, Iggy does the work on the ground for another short score to give the Bulldogs the lead once again. They go up 21-14 on this beautiful play action 2-point conversion. I believe that one went to Nick Johnson.
Nice catch in traffic.
But Springford wouldn't be done. They'd fight right back. With what else? The passing game. I believe the defender actually fell down.
Yeah, I think they got their feet tangled up.
Feet got tangled up, and
at that point,
behind.
when that happens, you just hope they don't find the receiver, but he did. A good quarterback like that. Now, this is another one of those plays. Like, there's no way Higgy should have scored on this play, but he finds a way.
He did.
Oh my gosh!
And Wilson goes up after the kick, 28-21, and that would do it. The Wilson defense would stand tall, and you'll see a couple plays here. A nice play by Andrew Weller, who had himself a fine game once again after being our player of the game for Mifflin. And then, of course, they wanted to make it interesting in the victory formation. I actually had some issues with the snap. Oh, good, these previews are out of order. But here's the Magalotti sack from the game. That would be the end. There's the score. So victory formation got thrown in there a little early, but they fumbled that snap. Thankfully, we recovered.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. That's always fun.
Yeah, the especially if you weren't there and you were watching the highlights, the way the mix-up in the preview order or the highlight order would make it seem as though we lost that fumble, and then that's not how that wasn't the case.
Apparently, I didn't.
No, that was
arrange that properly.
Yeah, no, that's not a big deal. We did recover that. I think we only had it down at one more time.
One more time,
that.
one more down, and the game was over. Wilson wins 28-21, as you saw. So let's get to individual stats and the individual accolade that we give out after every single game. So Connor Uhrig, senior quarterback, 8 of 20, 193 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 8 rushes for 24 yards. Iggy, we mentioned his name a lot. You saw him a lot. 10 rushes for 63 yards and 2 touchdowns. 3 receptions for 108 yards and 2 touchdowns. And most of that yardage was all him.
Yeah,
They were all short passes, like flares or in the flat or something.
Right.
And
he was just running straight through people. Like, you watch both of the 2 receptions there, both of them, like, they had 2 or 3 guys hitting him at once, and he just kind of brushed them off and kept running, so that's, I don't want to downplay it, but, like, that's Iggy being Iggy.
Yeah.
Like, we've seen that a number of times, and, it's never not amazing, but, I don't want to say you come to expect it, but it's not all that surprising. Does that make sense? Like,
sure.
It's not that you would expect it, right? Because that's kind of ridiculous too. But we've seen Iggy make those types of plays a number of times, and so it was fun to get to see him make some of those and enough of those in the game so that Wilson came out on top.
Sophomore Abdul McFoy saw more time in the game against Springford. He rushed 6 times for 13 yards, and we'll hear more from him in the Central Dauphin game. Junior tight end and inside linebacker Nick Johnson had 2 catches for 43 yards. He also contributed 6 tackles and a fumble recovery. And I mentioned Andrew Weller, who was our player of the game from Mifflin, had himself one heck of a game against Springford. Defensively, he had 7.5 tackles, 1 for loss, and you saw that one in the highlight. And again, I mentioned Sean McAndrew returning to football as a senior, playing well as a wide receiver, but playing good coverage as a defensive back. He contributed 5.5 tackles. 1.5 of those were for a loss. Again, near the end of the game, big time plays. He had that interception, and he also had 3 breakups. So before announcing our player of the game, we actually do have post-game interview. After the wins, we try to grab a couple guys to talk to, and we caught up with senior quarterback Connor Uhrig and senior wide receiver and outside linebacker Andrew Weller.
All right. Well, welcome back to the Bulldog Hour. I'm here post-game with seniors Andrew Weller and Connor Uhrig to talk about the Bulldogs' victory over Springford, the first of the year. So, guys, how's it feel to get that first W of the season?
Feels great to just get the first W, and we're just going to keep building off of it and hopefully get better every week.
I'm just looking to be 1-0 every week, build off, that loss really fueled us at the start of the season, so, we're coming back with a lot of fire every week.
What did you guys say to your teammates this week in practice leading up to this big game here in Royersford?
Just the fact that, hey, we lost, let's just, get over it. I mean, it sucks, but, you have to just move past it, learn from it, and, fix our mistakes so we have less mistakes.
Yeah, we used it as a learning tool, and all the seniors kept telling the guys, you got to keep the intensity up and just get better.
So another nice week. You didn't crumble under pressure. Last week we saw a furious comeback just come up a little bit short. This week they kept bringing it, and you always had an answer. Is there a resiliency to this team that's building up after these first 2 weeks?
Well, I think we're gaining a lot of confidence. We had a lot of new players starting in at week 1. Everyone was just, learning the system still. Even myself, I was nervous for the Mifflin game and this game. But I've gotten some confidence, so I think it's only up from here.
We lost that Mifflin game. That feeling is ruining us, and we don't want that to happen again. So we want to win every game.
It's actually been 24 years since Wilson started 0-2, and you guys don't have to join that party, join that club. That has to be a great feeling. Now, you talk about nervousness now. The last 2 weeks you've led the team in tackles, so you've kind of overcome those nerves, I think, to really put up a great performance defensively. We named you our player of the game last week. You had another stellar performance tonight. What do you credit for this quick start for you?
Well, I mean, the coaches are just calling my number. I'm just doing what they're telling me to do. So, I mean, it pretty much boils down to just executing.
Team fight.
It takes you after his brother, huh? So now, Connor, Andrew mentioned it, but starting a lot of young guys, a lot of underclassmen on a team. As one of the leaders, what difficulties does that show to you? These guys that haven't been in the fire before, like you have.
Well, they're still learning, and just all the seniors are trying to take them under the belt and help them get better, and just keep encouraging them that they're going to get better every week.
All right, guys, great performance from both of you. Better yet, great performance from the team getting that first W. We look forward to talking to you guys next week after the first home game versus Central Dauphin. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so we got to hear from Weller and Uhrig after the victory over Springford. Did not get to catch up with our player of the game. He was, of course, talking to other members of the media.
Yeah,
when you put up those kind of numbers, people want to talk to you. So I'm sure we'll talk to him at some point this year. But our Week 2 player of the game is senior running back and outside linebacker Iggy Reynoso. Again, we mentioned it before, the individual stats, but I'll say it again. 10 rushes for 63 yards and 2 touchdowns, and 3 receptions for 108 yards and 2 touchdowns. He put in the work, he got the stats, and he gets the call for our player of the game after Week 2.
Yeah, so we talked about the stats, but some of those runs, you saw them there, we saw them there. There were moments within those plays. Now, I was standing 5 feet from the Springford coaches. And yeah.
What do they have to say about it?
I think it would be what you would expect for, like, how did that happen? But more coach speak. Like, how did we not get him? Not one-on-one, but, like, this isn't a surprise to anybody. Teams are keying on Iggy, because everybody knows what he can do. They'd get 2 or 3 guys, maybe 4 guys there, when he catches the ball, and it wasn't enough. So that could be frustrating, or so I heard.
So you gather,
yeah.
huh?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll put a bow on week 2 and move on to week 3, the game that just happened 2 nights ago. Wilson welcoming in the Central Dauphin Rams. Home opener for the Bulldogs. Central Dauphin, a familiar foe. We've played them in the regular season every year since, I believe, 2014. Also met them in the district final that year. We saw them in the district final in 2011. I know I also saw them in the district final in 2002. So a team that, while we hadn't played them often, now of late we're seeing them much more frequently. And unfortunately for the Bulldogs, they had lost the last 2. The regular season meeting in 2015 was a close one, I believe 20-19. Then last year at Speed Eversole Stadium, Wilson fell 24-6. So the Bulldogs were hoping to get back on track. Unfortunately, as we mentioned earlier, that didn't quite happen as Wilson fell at home 28-20 to the Rams. But another effort like week 1 where Wilson was down pretty big early. I think at one point it was 28-6. And the Wilson team didn't give up, fought back, and actually had the ball after a stellar onside kick recovery about midway through the 4th, a little bit past that. There's about 6 minutes or so left. Wilson had recovered the onside, got inside the 15-yard line, but ended up turning it over on downs, and Central Dauphin proceeded to run out the clock the rest of the way. But Wilson had an offensive possession with a chance to possibly tie the game with a score in the conversion. Just couldn't get it done, but it's nice to know that they're not going to give up even when they're down multiple scores.
Yeah, and we talked about this earlier in the year when we were talking more earlier in the show when we were talking more big picture stuff about how, the year might not have gotten off to the start that a lot of the guys would have liked. That's pretty obvious. However, even within the games, you see them not give up. All right, and you have to hope that we can extrapolate that out to the season, and that this team will keep fighting, even when it looks like they may be down and out. That they're going to keep fighting, and eventually they're going to start to get some of those breakthroughs. We saw it at Springford. Things went bad. They could have packed it in 14-13, and it seemed like they had played so much better. And next thing you know, you're down, and then they could have packed it in. I know that was 1 point, but they could have easily, just the sense of that game. They fought so hard, down by 1.5. And they could be like, oh no, here we go again. But they didn't do that, and they overcame it. And so with Central Dauphin, they went down, and it could have gone real bad, real quick,
really
right?
Quickly, yeah.
Because Central Dauphin is one of those teams, and we talk about this in the preseason shows. We talk about it when we're previewing this game, and we talk about it coming back in the back end when we're always talking about district playoff scenarios and everything. Central Dauphin is just one of those teams that is always going to get the job done. You know what you're going to get, and I know that some people in the mid-pen are kind of talking about some unknowns there because of younger players and things, but we all know they're going to be really good come the end of October and November, and if you kind of pack it in, it would have gone really bad really quickly.
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
we didn't see that at all. We saw just the opposite. We saw Wilson kind of rally themselves, and we were wondering what are we going to see here? And they did rally, and they had that chance, and they weren't able to capitalize in this game. But those are the things that not giving up. Hopefully that pays off down the road. Because giving up would not have paid off. If anything else, you're just checking out then. But that fight will pay off at some point. You just have to keep battling, and just never give in.
You got to always think that you're going to win. Even if in the end you don't, you have to know that you're capable of doing it. You've done it before, and it's very admirable for them to keep fighting back against Mifflin and Central Dauphin, and hopefully
they're going to get a breakthrough.
Hopefully they get a bounce or a break their way. and things start clicking because you can tell that it's there. They just got to put it together.
It's just a couple things here and there. Now I know in the big picture you could be like, oh well, there's a lot of things. Yeah, but that's every game all the time. You're like, oh, there's this. We messed up this. But the difference in these games have been a couple things here and there. And if and it literally in some of them it's been like a 50-50 play that just didn't go our way, or the ball literally bounced the wrong way, or something. Sooner or later, some of these things are going to start going our way if they keep fighting and putting themselves in good positions. Yep. We'll see.
Let's go over some of the team stats, then we'll do highlights. First downs, Wilson actually had more than Central Dauphin, 18-14. Rushing yards, neither team could get it going on the ground. To think about a Wilson-Central Dauphin game where neither team rushed for 100 yards, and combined they barely got past the century mark.
That's crazy.
Wilson 48, Central Dauphin 60. Passing, well, that was happening all over the field. And believe it or not, the Bulldogs actually had more, 253 to Central Dauphin's 245. That gave totals over 300 for both teams, but very, very close, just like the ending of the game was. 301 to 305 favor the Rams. Time of possession, well, Wilson more first downs. Makes sense that they had the ball a little bit longer, 25-15 to 22-45. Third downs, both teams very good. Wilson above 50%, 8 of 15. Central Dauphin a stellar 8 of 12 on third down. Fourth downs, Central Dauphin perfect, 1 try, 1 success. Wilson unable to do it, 0 of 1. Red zone, Rams perfect again, 2 of 2. Wilson missed out on one of their red zone opportunities. I mentioned it was the last one of the game. They were inside the 15-yard line. Couldn't pull it out. Well, that was their only miss.
And the Central Dauphin, I believe the fourth down conversion was 4th and 1, or 4th and goal from like the 1 or
yes,
inside.
Yes, it was.
The 1.
It was early in the game. I believe it was their first touchdown actually.
Yeah.
Wilson actually had all the momentum. Well, we'll get to when we talk about the highlights. But Wilson had the momentum. They stopped Central Dauphin. They drove down the field on a huge drive.
Yeah.
Then they were about to stop Central Dauphin at their own goal line and just couldn't get it. And then all of a sudden, the Rams got all the momentum until the fourth quarter.
Right.
All right, so those are the team stats. Let's check out the highlights here from the game against Central Dauphin from just a few nights ago in Week 3. So, home opener at Gursky, September 15th in West Lawn. It was a beautiful start to the night, picturesque. There actually a massive donation to the parents organization from the All-State Foundation. We thank them for that. A little appearance of a non-rain rainbow, which was awesome. I mentioned Wilson offense was rolling early after the defense stopped Central Dauphin. Wilson went on, I think, a 17-play, 85-yard drive, and Iggy gets the touchdown. But kicking woes once again. Extra point, no good, wide left. Wilson leads 6-0. And here we are. This is the fourth one we talked about it. Mike Wise over the top to give the Rams the eventual lead as their kicker, Van Buskirk, one of the best in the state, nailed the extra points and probably would have done so with the field goals. Bell gets the call again. Mike Wise gets the call again a little bit later for the Rams. They lead 14-6. Now, one of Central Dauphin's big passing plays right down the middle. They go up 21-6. And now they're going to get to go up 28-6 on a tight end dump down the field, down the seam. Big play, I believe 45-yarder. And all of a sudden in the third quarter, it's 28-6. And you're wondering, well, are they going to give up or are they going to fight back? Well, Wilson thankfully decided to fight back. A nifty little shovel pass to the sophomore Abdul McFoy out of split back formation. And he shows his speed and gets to the end zone. 2-point try, though, unsuccessful here. You'll see it on a deep pass attempt. Wilson would be down 28-12. But it wasn't over. On a nice pass play to set up a touchdown here from Urig to Johnson, who rumbled and pleaded with the ref that he scored. I actually have picture evidence that he did not score. His knee was down. I had it on the camera. He was short at the 1.
We need to delete those pictures.
After a penalty, a little swing pass to Reynoso gets the Bulldogs to within a score, 28-20. After this, apparently the 2-point play didn't. It's probably be tacked on at the end because that's the way they like to do this to me. So there's the onside kick. It's 28-20. A great onside kick. Sean McAndrew recovered it, but Wilson unable to do on fourth down what they needed to is score. Central Dauphin got the ball back. They ran out the clock. There's the final, and I'm sure right now you're going to see that 2-point conversion. Oh, it'll be after the picture, too. Just add insult to injury. Oh, no, they won't show it at all. That's great. So there was a 2-point play in there. And so that's where we are with the Central Dauphin game, the highlights from that event. So not as many in there, but there were some key plays, some strong performances. Let's take a look at the individual stats from the game against the Rams. Uric had himself a nice night, 23 of 32, 253 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also had 13 rushes for -7 yards, but the only reason he's in the negative is because he was sacked 5 times.
Yeah.
Iggy Reynoso on the ground, 43 yards on 12 carries, plus the 1 touchdown you saw. He also had 7 receptions for 34 yards and a score as well. Abdul McFoy, who started to see more looks against Springford, he got much more against Central Dauphin. He had 4 rushes for 12 yards, but you saw the shovel pass. He also had another catch, 2 for 20, and the 1 touchdown receiving. Sean McAndrew had 6 catches for 35 yards. Chris Roberson got his first catches, 3 for 73 yards, and the 2-point conversion that wasn't shown. And Nick Johnson, a steady contributor all season so far, 3 catches for 61 yards, including that big one to set up the third Bulldog touchdown. He also contributed 5 tackles from his inside linebacker spot on defense. So Justin and I talked after the game. We deliberated of who do we think is the player of the game. It was a tough one. The skill guys get all of the hype, all of the ink. So we naturally were thinking of Iggy for the scores, Uric, who had 250-plus yards passing, couple touchdowns. Those are the 2 obvious ones, but we thought, thinking back on it and the way the game went, we'd go a little bit outside of the box and award a guy that has been probably one of the most consistent players for Wilson so far this year, at least in our opinion, in their first 3 games. And Justin, why don't you do the honors?
Yeah, so our player of the game this week is junior tight end and inside linebacker Nick Johnson. Joe kind of mentioned it with consistency and stability. His offensive numbers, three receptions for 61 yards. A lot of those yards came on that big play. That was a huge play at a huge time in the game. Really set up what looked like, well, it was an opportunity for Wilson to climb right back in it and make a run at the game. In those 5 tackles, he's kind of just been everywhere. He's been there on big third downs. He's been, it seems like he gets a lot of his receptions on the, like 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. He's getting 9, 10 yards all season. So Nick has been doing a great job, kind of being there on offense, also kind of being some stability there in the middle of the defense, and kind of his overall performance has got him the player of the game.
Yeah, so congratulations to junior tight end and inside linebacker Nick Johnson for being the Bulldog Hour's player of the game for Week 3. All right, to wrap things up here, we are going to do quick previews of the Week 4 and Week 5 games. Of course, we've mentioned a couple times now, Lancaster-Lebanon League Section 1 play starts this Friday at Gursky Stadium, where Wilson will welcome in the Warwick Warriors. The Bulldogs have a interesting history with Warwick. While this will be the 24th all-time meeting and the Bulldogs lead 20-3, as friend of the show Andy Hearn mentions all the time, a Warwick graduate, the Warriors always seem to play Wilson very, very tight,
yes,
very strong, even if they're not really that good, at least record-wise.
Yeah.
You'll see a Warwick team that wins 2, 3, 4 games and will take Wilson to the wire. We saw it in 2012 and 2014,
right,
and then 2016.
Right, yeah, 2016, that team, whew. That was a close one. Up in Lidditz, and it was Warwick had the ball and had a Hail Mary attempt. The ball didn't make it into the end zone, but I know talking to some of the guys from last year's team that were playing in the Lancaster-Lebanon League, like All-Star game, some of the Warwick kids were saying like, "Oh man, we thought we had you," and like, our guys were like, this is seniors who have moved on. We're like, no. But I'm like, yeah, no, they kind of did almost have you. Like, I see what the kid's saying. So that one had us a little worried. But Wilson was able to prevail, as they have been, the majority of the time. However, like you said, it's rarely the way you would expect it, given the team's overall pictures for those seasons. So not necessarily for this season, because for a long time we played Warwick towards the end of the league schedule. That has shifted to the beginning of the league schedule now.
Reorganization.
Right, so it's a little different because you don't have as much of those expectations built up, because sometimes it's really hard to compare non-league schedules. But
definitely,
you know what you're going to get. Warwick's going to play Wilson. They're going to play them tough, and Wilson has to be ready to go, or it's going to be a long night.
Yeah, so September 23rd last year was Wilson's last victory in the series, 14-10. You heard Justin mention how close it was. Last Warwick win, well, Wilson's on that 64-game league winning streak. So it's been a while since an LL team has beaten the Bulldogs, let alone Warwick. But it did happen in the last season when this all took off. September 21st, 2007, Warwick beat Wilson at Gursky, 14-12. So where are the Warriors in 2017? Well, right now they sit at 2-1. They, like the Bulldogs, had week 0 off. They had a scrimmage that week, as we're so used to. Of course, that'll be changing in just the next year. But in the regular week 1, while the Bulldogs were playing Governor Mifflin, the Warriors were taking on Mannheim Central, actually hosted them in Lidditz. And it's an interesting game. The final score was 35-27 in favor of the Barons, but that was actually 35-0 at one point. And Warwick had a furious comeback come up just short. But there was a lot of points scored and a lot of yardage in that game. And that's kind of the theme for Warwick in 2017. They went on the road the next 2 weeks. In week 2, they beat Garden Spot 69-42.
Yeah.
And then they beat Ephrata this past week 61-0.
Yeah, so averaging over 50 points a game 3 weeks into the season entering league play.
Yeah.
Yes, you heard not 15, 50, over 50 points a game. That's crazy.
It's hard to believe.
Right. So, yeah. Yeah. And the last two were on the road, as you mentioned. So,
right.
At Garden Spot, at Ephrata, about to play the third road game in a row. So they're going to have a number of games in Lidditz the remainder of the season. With this high-powered offense, that could be interesting to see how that plays out for the year for them.
After the way last year went, they want this one bad, and they obviously feel like they have the offense to do it. They probably think, can their defense stop our offense? And, only time will tell. We'll find out Friday at Gursky. The Warriors, interesting because they've got so many guys back. 13 players, 7 on offense, 6 on defense. Now, while Tremarchi graduated, they have a familiar face at quarterback. And former Wilson Bulldog Grayson Klein moved there prior to the start of this year, and he's the starter there this year. Of course, they have their top running back and receiver returning in Carter Forney. You can't discount the big tight end, Hayden Rucci.
Who is getting some D1 looks, I believe,
right,
when I was reading the previews from the season. So, yeah, the talent is there, and you can see that from the results so far this year. They're putting up. Those are some eye-catching numbers.
For sure.
It's one thing to be, 2-1. The loss was to Mannheim Central. No one's gonna blame anybody for that.
Nope.
That's you hate to say quality loss, but Mannheim Central's always going to be there competing for the Section 2 title
Definitely.
in LL League and a District 3 title most years. So, you're looking at that. That's not a big deal. And then they just destroyed the next two teams on their schedule. So, they look like they're ready to go. And like you said, I'm sure those guys that are returning and that are in place now at Warwick are ready for their chance and their shot at Wilson. They think, they have to feel like they let one slip away last year, and they think this is the year. I'm obviously suggesting that. I don't really have insight to that, but all the evidence would lead us to believe that that's what they would be kind of viewing this as.
You mentioned that they were in the midst of a streak of games on the road. They actually go to Lebanon the week after. So 4 of their final 5 games are in Lidditz.
Wow.
The only one on the road will be at Penn Manor. So they'll host Hempfield, Township, which
And that's
will be
a big one, and
huge
because they
game.
knocked off Township last year.
Correct. Then they'll go to Penn Manor, then they'll host Conestoga Valley before finishing with McCaskey. They get Township the week before Wilson. So Township, the three teams expected to challenge for the crown entering this year were Wilson, Township, and Warwick.
Right.
And Township's got them back to back.
Yeah.
So Warwick went 8-3 last year, was actually the LL Section 1 runner-up behind the Bulldogs, and they expect to be there, if not better, this year. And so far, they're looking pretty strong. Should be a good one Friday night.
Yeah,
at
come
Gursky.
out to Gursky on Friday night. It should be an entertaining game, and hopefully, like we talked about, Wilson will keep battling and get some of those things shored up in practice this week, and they'll be able to get things in line and get a positive result. We're confident they keep fighting, things will start going their way. So hopefully we can see some of that come up this Friday.
The Wilson Football Tradition Club is also honoring 3 past championship teams, actually the first 3 title teams in Wilson football program history from 1950, 1967, and 1969. So come out and check that out as well. If the game isn't enough to entice you, maybe seeing some former Bulldog players and coaches return to be honored will do that for you. And again, that game is this Friday, September 22nd. In West Lawn. All right, our final topic this evening, Week 5, where Wilson will head to Lancaster to take on the JP McCaskey Red Tornado. Now, the Bulldogs and McCaskey rivalry is a fierce one. It's the 45th all-time meeting between the programs. Wilson leads it 36 wins, 7 losses, and 1 tie. The last meeting just last year at Gursky, where Wilson put a beating down on McCaskey 55-0. It got Wilson back on track, recovering from that loss to Central Dauphin and that near miss at Warwick. They responded perfectly and beating the Tornado. But that one's at home. This one, we got to go to McCaskey, and it's always a little bit different on that grass field. Players not used to it with how many turf fields there are.
Yeah, not anymore. Yeah.
And the last time McCaskey won in this series was actually at McCaskey, and that was on September 26, 2003. That was Chad Henney's senior year. 31-14, the Tornado beat the Bulldogs nearly 14 years ago.
We were just talking the other night about, those early 2000 McCaskey teams with Perry Patterson.
Yep.
And, man, those teams are loaded. For those of you who don't know, Perry Patterson went on to be quarterback at Syracuse.
They had a couple other guys, too, that went D1.
Yeah, they had.
I think they and Cedar Crest had 3 or 4 guys each.
It was insane. But anyway, so, that's we're long removed from that. But, like 2 years ago, for example, if you go into McCaskey not ready to go, especially on the road at McCaskey, you're going to be in for a fight.
Yeah.
So, they're not off to the start that they would have liked this year. But if you're not ready when you go in there and you're not going to give it your best, next thing you know, you're going to be at halftime and you're going to be in a fight till the end. And you don't want to be in a spot where one play can change it, because they definitely have the ability, some big play capabilities to get on the board in a hurry. So you don't want to mess around,
Yeah.
So
they were 4-6 last year. They went 2-5 in the league and were tied for 5th place in LL Section 1. So they're actually a game behind, because they were 2-1 in non-league last year. The schedule wasn't so easy. When you have to go to State College, who's one of probably the best teams in the state in 6A this year, it's got a tough task. They lost to the Little Lions 45-12. They then went on to the road and started their kind of city series. They took on York William Penn and lost 36-30 before coming to our neck of the woods to beat Reading 38-21. First win of the season for McCaskey last week. This week, in Week 4, they travel to Conestoga Valley. So an opportunity there to see which teams that tend to have high-flying offenses will come out on top, McCaskey or CV. That is Week 4 for the Red Tornado. Not too much else to say about McCaskey. We kind of already said it, that they're always a team that you can't overlook, because they have immense talent athletically off the charts speed wise. They always have guys that you're not sure how you can cover them or how you can stop them if they get into a open field. And you mentioned 2015. It took some time for Wilson to get going, and once they did, Wilson took care of business. But one of these years, it's going to be a tough task. So the team's got to be ready and can't overlook anyone as the season wears on. Anything else from you about McCaskey?
No, we are just by the matter of the show, we're looking ahead 2 weeks, but I'm excited for league play. But this week at home against Warwick is going to be a big one, and then have to quickly rebound because you go on the road to McCaskey. And like we said, you never know what you're going to get, and you never know what kind of performance you're going to get when you go on the road to McCaskey. Just a little bit of a different atmosphere. Like you mentioned, the grass field, which sounds ridiculous, but that probably will be the only grass game we'll play this year.
Most likely.
So, it's just one of those weird things. That sounds ridiculous, playing on grass, but, it's just different. So, hopefully they can get things on track this week, and then continue to build and get things rolling here in the league schedule.
Couple of milestones of note to state before we head out of here for this week. Inside linebackers coach Matt Bender sits at 199 wins as a Wilson football assistant. So the Bulldogs' next victory will be his 200th. So we look forward to that milestone, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Of note, getting close to a benchmark, offensive coordinator Jeremy Palm is at 147, and defensive backs coach Brandon Naples is at 119. And the win in Week 2 at Springford was Coach Doms' 130th as head coach. He passes Wilson's Jerry Slemmer for second in program history. And I mentioned this to Coach Doms in the preseason, but he needs 22 to pass legendary Coach John Gursky's record of 151. And maybe more kind of crazy to think about this number, but Coach Doms is just 6 wins away from 400 victories with the Wilson football program. He earned 264 as an assistant before garnering 130 currently as head coach. So 6 more as the head coach, which still can come this season. He will get to 400 victories with Wilson.
That's insane.
That's a lot of numbers.
That's a crazy number.
That's a lot of wins to think about. Now, obviously, he's been, I think this is his 42nd season.
Something like that,
as a Wilson football coach.
Yeah.
But still,
again,
you're averaging
another
close to
crazy
10,
number.
Right? Close to 10 wins a season. I mean, it's not quite 10, but still, 42 years get to 400 wins if it happens.
Think of it this way. He was coaching before some of the parents of the current players were born.
Oh man, that's it. Well, I mean, I think has he said he's coached any grandchildren yet?
I don't know, but we got to ask him.
Yeah. Has he? I mean, I know he's had father-sons.
Right.
Like that's how it's happening now. It's been happening for years. But has he gotten into a third generation yet?
I don't know. We're gonna have to look, and if not, maybe we can try and point one out.
You can ask him that one.
Yeah. Hey.
Hey, by the way,
Joey wanted to know.
All right, so what can you expect from us on game night? So make sure you like the Wilson Bulldogs and Bulldog Hour fan pages on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Wilson Bulldogs and at Bulldog Hour. We give live game updates with photos and now broadcasting the game apparently on Facebook. Well, at least the away games, because Wilson Media Productions does a fine job for the home games. But whenever we're away, people are always asking how they can watch the game. And I got a great assistant in Justin Burke, a former player and a coach for us out at West Middle School. When he's around, which is nearly every week when he's not scouting for the high school team, he helps me to stream the game. So we plan to do that for the rest of the season at all away contests. And obviously, after every victory, we should have video interviews post-game, and we'll have that on the following Bulldog Hour. Again, the next live show from us will be Sunday, October 1st, recap Weeks 4 and 5, preview Weeks 6 and 7. Anything else? Anything to say, Justin?
Just
before
one
we go?
thing. I believe I saw that the coaches' wives.
Yes.
Their fundraising efforts at the home game
Over
on Friday night.
$1,100.
Yeah. So that's awesome.
Great job.
100% of it going to hurricane relief, and every little bit helps a lot. So I believe they'll be doing something at the
Yeah.
Probably not this, maybe not the exact same thing, but they'll be doing something.
Yes.
They be on the lookout for that this Friday when you come out to see the Bulldogs take on Warwick.
Definitely, the Wilson Football Wives, and are doing it in conjunction with the United Methodist Committee on Relief, and they are doing something at the game against Warwick this Friday. I don't know if it'll be a bake sale, it might just be donation buckets, or maybe something else they come up with. But great initiative, great job by them, and thank you to everyone that donated for the bake sale and everyone that bought and donated funds for the first round at the home opener versus Central Dauphin. Like I said, I believe over $1,100 in just a few hours. So great job by them. All right, I think that's everything. So we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Bulldog Hour. For Justin Raffoff and the Wilson Football Program, I'm Joe Mays, and remember,
Go Bulldogs.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Bulldog Hour. Want more Wilson football? Follow the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud, or visit www.bulldoghour.com. The Bulldog Hour is a featured program on jmnjrradio.com.